Some heartaches don't come with loud goodbyes or slammed doors. No, some just slip in quiet, like a draft through a window you didn't know was open. That's how it felt that Christmas. Now, I ain't one for dramatics, but I do believe there's a particular kind of ache when love you poured like warm cider into someone's hands gets left out in the cold. Especially when that someone is your own flesh and blood. I reckon this story ain't just about a canceled trip or a lonely Christmas. It's about the unraveling thread between a mother and her grown daughter, and what it means to pick up the needle again, even when your hands are shaking. If you enjoy stories like these, I'd be mighty grateful if you'd subscribe, give it a like, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It always means something when folks like you take the time to listen. Now let me take you back to the morning it all began. The suitcase sat by the door, zipped and ready, with a little red ribbon tied on the handle, just like I used to do with her ballet shoes when she was little, so she'd know which ones were hers. Outside, the sky was doing that soft gray thing it does in December, like it hadn't made up its mind whether to snow or cry. I remember staring at the phone in my hand, rereading her message, the screen glowing like a cold slap in the face. Hey Mom. Something came up. I won't make it this year. Hope that's okay. Love you. Hope that's okay. I stood there in my good coat, the one with the velvet collar she'd bought me 2 Christmases ago, waiting for the pain to feel real. But all I could feel was the quiet hum of the heater and Muffin's soft paws circling my ankles. Hope that's okay. I'd saved for 2 years. Booked the flights. Rented the little cottage in Vermont with the twinkle lights and fireplace she swore reminded her of that Hallmark movie we used to watch every year. Stocked the fridge with almond milk and gluten-free snacks, just how she liked. Hope that's okay. I was dusting the mantle when I found it, the little pinecone angel she made in kindergarten. Its wings were crooked, one eye missing, the glitter long since dulled with time. But oh how it used to sparkle. She'd named it Miss Tinsel and insisted we hang it front and center on the tree every single year. Even when she was too old to say so out loud, she'd still look for it, eyes twinkling, pretending not to care. I held it in my hand and felt that familiar tug, the kind that lives somewhere between nostalgia and grief. It's funny, the things that stay and the people who don't. This was supposed to be our Christmas. Just the 2 of us, snowed in with peppermint cocoa and old movies, laughing about the way she used to eat the cookie dough raw and pretend it was taste testing. I dreamed of that trip. Not for the scenery or the snow, but for her. For us. But all I got was a text. And that's when I did it. I picked up the phone, opened the airline app, and hit cancel. Not just on the flights, but on the whole illusion. The idea that she still needed me, that I could fix things with enough effort or perfectly wrapped gifts. It wasn't anger, not really. It was something softer and sadder. Like folding up a favorite quilt you realize you'll never get to share again. You know, there's a certain kind of silence that settles into a house once the children are grown and gone. Not the peaceful kind. No, it's a restless hush, like the walls are still waiting to hear footsteps, laughter, the clatter of dishes after dinner. That's the kind of quiet my house carried most days now. My daughter's name is Lila. Short for Delilah, though she never liked being called that. Said it made her sound like a biblical seductress. She was always clever like that, quick-tongued with a smirk that could melt you or sting you, depending on her mood. She's my only child. Born late in life, after a string of miscarriages that nearly unraveled me. I was 42 when I held her for the first time. I still remember the nurse whispering, "She's a miracle baby." And I believed her. My husband, Richard, he cried when he first saw Lila. Great big, body-shaking sobs like he'd been holding his breath for years. He passed 8 years ago. Cancer. Quick and cruel. Lila was in college at the time, and though she flew home for the funeral, something in her shifted after that. Like her roots had been torn loose, and she didn't quite know where to replant. After he died, I tried to hold things together the best I could. I baked her favorite lemon bars when she visited, kept her room just the way she left it, even sent care packages to her Boston apartment with little notes that said things like, "Your mama misses you." Sometimes she'd call. Sometimes she wouldn't. I never pressed. The truth is, we'd been drifting for years, but I kept telling myself it was just the tides of adulthood. Kids grow, they change, they forget the smell of their old bedspreads and the taste of home-cooked meals. But they don't forget their mothers, right? That's what I used to believe. Until the Christmas she didn't come home. It started innocently enough. I might be tight this year, around Thanksgiving. Then, work's been crazy, not sure I can swing it. I told her I'd cover everything. That I'd already booked the trip. A cozy cottage, just the two of us, snow falling on the roof like powdered sugar. I could hear the hesitation in her voice, the way her words tiptoed around the truth. Still I hoped. Isn't that what mothers do? I bought her a new scarf, the soft kind she likes, wrapped it in tissue paper with a handwritten card. I had her favorite cereal in the pantry. Even Muffin seemed to sense something was coming. She kept sitting by the window, ears twitching, watching the road. And then, just 5 days before Christmas, the message came. Hey Mom. Something came up. I won't make it this year. Hope that's okay. Love you. Hope that's okay. I sat there on the edge of the couch, her message still glowing on my phone like a little open wound. The tree lights blinked behind me, soft and patient, like they didn't yet know there'd be no one here to unwrap the presents beneath them. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stared at those 3 words. Hope that's okay, and felt something loosen inside me. Something old. Something tired. I stood, walked into the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. That's what we do down here in Charleston. Brew a solution, stir in a little honey, pretend it heals what hurts. But the tea tasted hollow, and the silence, once warm and familiar, turned sharp around the edges. It wasn't the first time Lila had disappointed me, but it was the first time I realized she might not come back. You see, after Richard died, she changed. At first, it was subtle, long silences on the phone, sudden bursts of irritation when I asked simple things like how work was going or whether she was eating enough. Then came the distance. Literal, emotional, all of it. She'd moved in with a boy named Travis, marketing exec, city slick smile, thought my cobbler was cute. I tried. Lord knows I tried to like him, to welcome him with fried chicken and stories of when Lila was little, how she used to dress the cat up in doll clothes. But he'd sit there thumbing through his phone, barely nodding, his world too big for my small-town memories. Still, I never blamed him. Not really. Because Lila's choices were her own. And maybe I didn't always understand them. The tattoos, the job that kept her glued to a screen, the therapy lingo she'd toss at me like gospel. But I never stopped trying. Last Christmas, she came for 2 nights. She stayed mostly on her laptop, fielding work emergencies, and left before the pie had even cooled. I cried when she left, not from sadness exactly, but from the hollow echo of her presence, like she'd been a ghost brushing through a place she no longer belonged. But this year I'd promised myself, and her, it would be different. The Vermont cottage was my idea. A fresh place. New memories. I even sent her photos of the fireplace, the snow-covered trees, the quaint little kitchen with red gingham curtains. She'd replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a looks cute. That was enough hope for me to press confirm on the $10,000 reservation. Flights, car rental, cottage, everything. But now here I was 5 days out, no daughter, no trip, just the growing ache of realization. I didn't call her. Didn't reply to the message. Instead, I logged into the airline app, went to my reservations and clicked cancel. A simple act. 1 button. But it felt like severing a rope I'd been clinging to for years. That night, I sat by the fire with Muffin curled beside me, and I looked at the suitcase still packed by the door. I unzipped it slowly, 1 item at a time. The green sweater she once said made me look elegantly festive, the tin of ginger snaps I baked every year, the puzzle we were supposed to do together. I unpacked the dream, piece by piece, and when I got to the last item, a tiny snow globe I'd bought her when she was 7, the one she'd lost and cried over for days. I held it up to the firelight and shook it gently. The snow inside swirled, and for a moment, I saw her there, 7 years old, laughing in flannel pajamas, asking if she could stay up just 10 more minutes. But that little girl was gone. And maybe, just maybe, I needed to stop waiting for her to come back. The morning after I canceled the trip, I woke up early. Not out of excitement or habit, but because the weight in my chest wouldn't let me sleep. I lay there in the hush of dawn, listening to the slow tick of the kitchen clock and the soft snore of Muffin on the quilt beside me. I reached for my phone. No new messages. Not from Lila, anyway. Just a weather alert. Snow coming in 2 days. The kind of snow we don't often get down here. Thick and stubborn. Enough to hush the world. I made my way to the kitchen and cracked the window just a bit. The air was sharp, and it smelled like chimney smoke and pine needles. I brewed coffee and stood by the window, watching the frost creep along the edges of the glass. That's when the doorbell rang. Startled me half out of my slippers. I wasn't expecting anyone. Folks don't usually drop in unannounced unless it's serious or sweet, and I hadn't ordered either. At the door stood Opal Watkins, my neighbor 3 houses down. Widow, church pianist, and the kind of woman who could turn gossip into a prayer request with just the right tone. She wore a puffy blue coat and held a tin of cookies in one hand and her phone in the other. "Ellie," she said, "you all right, honey? I just saw your Christmas lights go off on the timer, and you usually keep them on till the new year." I blinked. I hadn't even noticed I'd turned them off. "I'm fine, Elide. Just making some changes this year." She peered at me the way Southern women do when they know better than to press but still ache to be told. "Well," she said after a moment, holding out the tin, "these are almond lace. I know you like those. Made a double batch. Thought you might want some company." I took the cookies, nodded, and invited her in. We sat at the kitchen table like 2 hens in winter, sipping coffee and letting the silence speak for us. Opal didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. I think she saw it on my face, in the way I didn't offer cream or reach for the napkins like I usually do. Grief makes us forget the small courtesies. After a long while, she said gently, "You know, sometimes the hardest part of being a mother is learning when to let him go, and when to let them come back on their own." I swallowed hard. "I thought I did that already," I said. "Well," she shrugged. "Sometimes they leave more than once." We sat there, the heater humming low, the cookies untouched between us. And for the first time, I admitted it out loud. "She doesn't need me anymore, Opal." Opal reached across the table, laid her hand over mine. "That don't mean you stop being her mama." Opal left just before noon, her coat zipped high and her arms full of the tin I'd returned, still nearly full. I watched her shuffle down the front walk, pausing once to look back, her breath fogging in the cold. I gave a little wave, but she didn't smile. Just nodded, like she knew there wasn't a thing in the world her cookies could fix. I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning. Not out of necessity. The house was already neat as a pin, but because grief makes you restless. I scrubbed the kitchen floor on my hands and knees, polished the silver that never gets used, even ironed the pillowcases in the guest room. The one I'd made up just for Lila. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I did something worse. I opened the old cedar chest in my bedroom, the one where I keep all the things I tell myself I've moved on from. Inside were baby shoes, Lila's first tooth in a tiny velvet box, a dried corsage from her senior prom, and a bundle of letters, the ones she used to write me from camp, from college, even a few from her first apartment. I unfolded one at random. The paper was crinkled soft with age, the ink faded, but her handwriting was unmistakable, loopy, full of flourishes. "Dear Mama," it began. "I miss you so much it hurts. Travis says hi, but I miss your pancakes. I hate the city. Everything is loud and nobody says good morning. Thank you for the care package. I cried when I saw the tea towels. I didn't even know I missed them. Love you forever, Lila." I sat there on the floor, holding that piece of paper like it might disappear if I blinked. And finally, the tears came. Quiet, but deep. The kind that sneak up through the cracks and soak everything before you even notice. How did we get from that to hope that's okay? I couldn't tell you when exactly things turned. Maybe it was after Richard died, when I clung too tightly. Or maybe it was when I stopped asking the hard questions, stopped insisting she come home. Maybe she mistook my softness for disinterest. Or maybe she just outgrew me. But here's the thing no one tells you about being a mother. Your love don't shrink when they pull away. It grows, gets louder, and sometimes it spills over. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine. A deep red Merlot that Lila once said gave her headaches like heartbreak. And I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone again. I opened a blank message. Typed. I canceled the trip. Not because I was mad. Just tired of waiting to matter. I love you. Still. Always. But I don't know how to keep reaching without breaking. Mama. I hovered over send. My thumb trembled. And then I deleted it. Some words are better held in the chest until they soften into something gentler. Or until the right silence answers back. The snow came early. By Thursday morning, Charleston was blanketed in a soft hush of white, rare, thick flakes drifting past the windows like feathers let loose from some high, holy place. The whole neighborhood slowed. Cars sat idle. Children bundled up in mismatched scarves and yelled with joy in the streets. Even the mockingbirds quieted down, their songs muffled by the snow's heavy silence. I stood at the window in my robe, coffee in hand, and watched the world forget its rush for a while. My phone still hadn't rung. 3 days till Christmas. I'd convinced myself I was fine. That a quiet holiday wouldn't kill me. That I'd light the fire, eat something warm, maybe rewatch Little Women like I used to with Lila. The old version with Winona Ryder and that soft golden light. I told myself I'd enjoy the stillness. But stillness is a funny thing. It can be a bomb, or a blade. Around mid-morning, I heard the mailbox clatter shut. I opened the front door and braved the chill barefoot, a foolish stubborn act, to fetch the mail. A few catalogs, a water bill, and one red envelope with a Boston postmark. My heart caught. Lila's handwriting. I took it inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and stared at it for a good 5 minutes before I dared tear it open. Inside was a Christmas card. Not the kind we used to send with glitter glue and construction paper, but a glossy, store-bought one with a photo on the front. Lila and Travis, standing in front of a Christmas tree. They were both wearing matching sweaters, hers green, his red, and holding mugs that said his and hers. No note. Just a signature at the bottom. Love, Lila and Travis. That was it. No miss you, Mama. No epalegi. Not even a next year, maybe. I stared at it, this curated piece of her new life, and felt a strange mix of pride and pain. She looked happy. She looked whole. She looked like she'd already put me behind her. The card sat on the table all day. I couldn't throw it away, but I couldn't bring myself to put it on the mantel either. It felt like a relic, a souvenir from a family I no longer belonged to. That night the storm thickened. I lost power for a few hours, lit candles, pulled blankets around my shoulders. The house groaned in the wind, and I let myself imagine what it would have been like to have her there beside me, laughing as we played board games by candlelight, sipping cocoa with peppermint sticks. Instead, it was just me and Muffin, and a Christmas card that said everything without saying a word. The power flickered back on sometime after midnight, just as the candles had melted into their stubs and the shadows began whispering their old stories. I rose from the couch stiff and cold, pulled the quilt tighter around my shoulders, and shuffled into the kitchen to unplug the kettle I'd forgotten was on the stove. Muffin, curled tight as a question mark on the armchair, gave a soft sigh but didn't stir. I moved to the table again, drawn like a moth to that red envelope. I opened it once more, as if maybe this time, there'd be more inside. A postscript. A tiny slip of paper. A hidden message between the lines. But there wasn't. Just the photo and the card, same as before. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. Tucked in the bottom corner of the envelope, barely visible against the red, was a receipt. A gift receipt. From a store up in Boston. Boutique Place. Handwritten note scrawled across the bottom. To Mom. Hope you love it. XL. I sat up straighter, my pulse stumbling. I hadn't received anything. I checked the porch, nothing. I walked out barefoot again, this time in the snow, scanning the bushes, the bench, the mailbox, even under the steps. Still nothing. Back inside, I searched through old delivery notices, my email, even my spam folder. No missed package, no shipping delay, no tracking number. I stood in the hallway, suddenly unsure what stung worse. The idea that the gift was lost, or that it had never been sent at all. The next morning, I walked over to Opal's. Her lights were on, cinnamon scent wafting from her window. She answered in a housecoat, curlers still in. "Ellie," she said, surprised. "You okay, honey?" I told her about the card, the receipt, the missing package. My voice trembled, though I tried not to let it. She listened, quiet and steady. Then she said, "You know, I once sent a letter to my son that never arrived. Found it in the back seat of my car 3 months later, under the mat. Life has a way of misplacing things we meant to give." Her words meant well, but they didn't answer the ache curling inside me. It wasn't just about the gift. It was about the gap, the empty space where her voice should have been. The silence growing like ivy through all the places we used to laugh. I went home, put the card back in the envelope, and tucked it behind the old nativity set on the bookshelf. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But I was something close. Something quieter. Disbelief. Not just that she hadn't come, but that she didn't seem to notice what it did to me. Christmas Eve came with a hard blue sky and wind that whistled like a warning. The snow had settled thick across the porch railings, and every tree on our street looked dipped in powdered sugar. Children's laughter echoed somewhere in the distance, the sound of sleds, shouts, and mittens thudding against packed snow. Inside my house, it was too quiet. I hadn't baked. Hadn't even turned on the tree lights. The suitcase still sat by the front door, half unpacked now, like a metaphor I wasn't brave enough to finish. The Vermont cottage, long canceled, probably sat empty and beautiful, waiting for someone who never planned to arrive. I called no one that day. Not even my sister June, who always invites me up to Asheville even though she knows I won't come. Instead, I made myself a bowl of oatmeal, lit a fire, and tried not to look at the clock. But time gets louder when you're alone. At 3:42 p.m. my phone buzzed. Lila. My breath caught. Not a call. Just a message. "Hey, just checking in. Merry Christmas Eve. Hope you're staying warm. Sorry again for everything. Been hectic. Talk soon." Yellow heart, that was it. No mention of the gift. No follow-up about the canceled trip. No real us, not even a question. And that's when something inside me snapped. Not loud. Not angry. Just clear. I walked over to the coat rack, took off the velvet collared coat she'd given me years ago, and hung it back. Then I sat at the dining table, pulled out a notepad, the kind with magnolias printed faintly in the corners, and began to write. Not a letter to her, but a letter to myself. You have done enough, Eleanor. You have tried, waited, forgiven, hoped. You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. You are simply no longer centered in the life of someone you once cradled. And that is not your fault. Each word I wrote, the more my hand steadied. I finished the note, tore it from the pad, and tucked it inside my Bible, Psalm 27, where it always falls open from use. Then I did something I never thought I would. I took down the photo of Lila and me from the mantle, the one from her high school graduation where we're laughing, my hand on her shoulder, her eyes full of light, and I set it face down in a drawer. It wasn't spite. It was grief making space for itself. That drawer closing made more noise in my heart than any slam of a door ever could. It was like burying a memory while it was still breathing. I sat there, staring at the bare spot on the mantle, and felt a wave of guilt so sudden, so strong. I thought I might drown in it. Who was I to tuck her away like that? She's still my child. Still the baby I rocked through colic storms, the teenager I held through her first heartbreak, the young woman who called me mama, like it was a place she could return to. But that was just it. She hadn't returned. Not really. Not in years. And I was tired, bone tired, of holding my breath every December. I got up slowly, made myself a cup of chamomile, and sat by the fire. The flames crackled gently, as if whispering secrets too warm to keep. Muffin jumped up onto the armrest, her tiny paws kneading the wool of my shawl. Her purring was the only sound, rhythmic and real. That's when I noticed something. In the glow of the fireplace, something shimmered beneath the edge of the bookshelf. I leaned down, heart pounding a little, the way it does when something ordinary turns mysterious, and pulled out a small cardboard parcel, no bigger than a paperback. No return address. Just my name, Mom, written in Lila's handwriting. I stared at it for a full minute before daring to peel back the tape. Inside was a delicate wooden music box, carved in the shape of a little cabin, a near replica of the Vermont cottage. There was a tiny chimney, snow etched into the eaves, and a painted wreath on the door. On the bottom, a brass turnkey and an inscription. Still wish we were there. Love L. My hands trembled as I wound it slowly. The tune began, soft, twinkling, familiar. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. I held it close, eyes stinging. She had thought of me. She had tried. Maybe not with words. Not with plans. But with this. Somewhere between Boston and Charleston. This small gift had arrived quietly, like her love always did. Late, uncertain, but real. And yet, it wasn't enough. Not because the gift was too small or the gesture too late, but because the damage was older than this Christmas. It had grown slowly, season by season, like frost on window panes that no one bothers to scrape clean. I couldn't undo that. Couldn't fix it with a music box. I placed it on the mantel, in the very spot where our photo had been, and I stood back. It looked beautiful there. But I didn't feel beautiful. I felt worn, like a woman too long in waiting. The phone buzzed again. This time a video from Lila. I tapped play with a finger that trembled. It was just 10 seconds. Her face in a winter hat, cheeks pink, smile tired. Behind her, Travis laughing with someone out of frame. Mum. It's snowing here, finally. I hope it's snowing there too. I know it's not the same, but I love you. I do. Merry Christmas. And then it ended. Like that. No apology. No call. No plan to visit. Just a message in the wind. I sat there long after the screen went black. Torn between two truths. She did love me, and she'd still chosen to be somewhere else. Maybe that was the sharpest pain of all. Not abandonment, but the slow realization that sometimes, love alone doesn't bring people home. Christmas morning came soft and gold, the way it always does, like the sky itself is trying to be kind. I woke to silence. Not the peaceful sort, but that too still quiet that hangs in the air after a truth's been spoken, or worse, silently accepted. The coffee pot burbled in its usual rhythm. Muffin nudged my leg, tail curling like ribbon. I poured my cup, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the music box on the mantel. It played nothing. I hadn't wound it. I didn't want to. Something in me had shifted. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. I think I'd spent the better part of the last decade holding on to the mother I used to be. The one who made butterfly-shaped pancakes. The one who stayed up until 2 a.m. helping build science fair volcanoes. The one who knew every favorite color, every allergy, every heartbreak. But that version of me only existed inside Lila's childhood. And children, well, they grow up. The hard part, the part nobody warns you about, is that they don't always take you with them when they go. I spent the morning in small ways of grieving. I folded the guest room linens. I took the wrapped gifts from under the tree, the ones I'd labeled to Lila with gold ink pens, and gently placed them back in the closet. I unplugged the tree lights and let the house dim. I didn't cry, but I felt like someone who had. By midday, I decided to go for a walk. Charleston doesn't often wear snow like a proper coat. It's more of a shawl here, fleeting and light, but that morning, it lingered like a miracle. The sidewalks sparkled. Wreaths hung heavy with ice. Children built snowmen with sticks for arms and marshmallow eyes. I passed 3 folks who waved and said Merry Christmas in that neighborly way that asks nothing in return. I ended up at the park near the church, the one with the old wrought iron benches and that sycamore tree Lila used to climb when she was little. I sat down beneath it, snow crunching under my boots, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself remember everything without editing it. The tantrums, the slammed doors, the silence after fights, the slow years, the hopeful ones. The first Christmas she didn't come home, she sent a long email, full of apologies and promises. I'd printed it and tucked it in my Bible, just like the one I wrote myself this year. Back then, I believed every word. Believed that time was a loop. That we'd find our way back to the center. But now I wasn't so sure. A breeze stirred the branches above me, knocking snow down in soft plumes. It dusted my coat, settled on my hands. And I thought, maybe she loves me, but not in a way that includes me anymore. That thought should have broken me. But it didn't. It steadied me, like touching the bottom of the ocean, and realizing you're still breathing. I walked home slow, let the cold settle into my bones like truth. When I reached my porch, I saw the envelope waiting again, not Lila's but another red one, this time from the church. Likely a holiday newsletter or donation reminder. But tucked beneath it was something else. A package. Smaller than the first. No name. No address. Just one word scribbled in silver ink. Mama. I stood there on the porch, snow melting slow beneath my slippers, staring at that second package like it might vanish if I blinked. It was wrapped in brown craft paper, plain as dirt, but there was something tender about the way my name was written. Mama, soft and careful, like someone had said it aloud as they wrote it down. The handwriting was different from the first. Slanted. A little more hurried. Not from Lila. I turned it over. No postie. No barcode. No delivery slip. Someone had placed it there by hand. I brought it inside, sat at the kitchen table where the morning light angled warm across the wood, and opened it slowly, tearing just the edges, as if afraid I might hurt whatever lay inside. It was a small photo album. Handmade, bound in worn leather, with a pressed daisy tucked beneath the front flap, dry and delicate, like it had been hiding inside something for years. I opened it and gasped. The first page was a photo I hadn't seen in decades. Lila on her 3rd birthday, face covered in frosting, her tiny hand reaching for mine. I remember that day, the way she shrieked with joy when the sparklers lit up the cake, the way Richard laughed so hard he nearly dropped the camcorder. The next page was one I didn't recognize. A Polaroid of me, years older, maybe 5 years ago, standing in my garden in my denim overalls, holding a basket of heirloom tomatoes. I was laughing at something. My eyes were closed, my head tilted back. Who took this? Each page that followed was like that. Unfamiliar moments I'd lived but never captured. Me hanging laundry in the spring. Me reading on the porch with muffin curled in my lap. Me lighting a candle at Richard's grave. At the back was a small note, hand-penned on lined paper. Mama, I know I've been far. Too far. I've been scared of how much I love you. Scared it makes me weak. Scared I couldn't live up to the kind of love you gave. I took these over the years when I visited. When you didn't notice. Or when I thought I couldn't stay. I wanted to remember. I always remember. Love, Lila. I sat back, breath shallow, heart knocking like a fist against the inside of my chest. She had come back. Quietly. Without asking. Without knocking. She'd come home while I was asleep, while I was planting things, while I was hurting and pretending not to be. She had come, and she had watched, and she had carried pieces of me back into the world like breadcrumbs. And still, she hadn't stayed. That truth tangled deep. Because what do you do with love that won't root? What do you do with a daughter who visits like a ghost, who captures you but won't claim you? I stared at the album for a long time. The daisy on the cover looked ready to crumble. I wanted to protect it. I wanted to press it back between pages, keep it safe, like I'd always tried to do with her. But maybe that was the problem all along. Trying to keep her. Trying to hold her in the shape I once knew. I rose from the table, walked to the mantel, and picked up the music box. Gently I wound it, just one turn. The cabin glowed under the Christmas lights I'd turned back on. The music began again, slow, tentative, familiar. Through the years we all will be together. I picked up the photo album, held it against my chest. And I cried. Not because she didn't come, but because some part of her still had. Because love, even when distant, can leave proof. Because sometimes, we are seen without knowing, loved without presence, remembered in ways we may never fully understand. I didn't reply to her message. Not yet. I needed a little more silence. A little more time. But I lit the fire again. I pulled the green sweater back out of the suitcase. I warmed a plate of ginger snaps and set 2 mugs on the table. One for me, and one for whoever she used to be, whoever she might be still. Because maybe motherhood isn't about holding on. Maybe it's about setting a place, just in case. The days after Christmas passed in a strange kind of stillness. Not sad exactly, but quiet in that heavy way winter has of making everything feel like it's waiting for something. Waiting for thaw. Waiting for change. Waiting for someone to knock on the door who probably never will. I left the tree up longer than usual, though I didn't turn the lights on most nights. Just let it sit there in the dark like a memory too tired to sparkle. Muffin made a nest beneath it, and sometimes I'd find her curled up there, snoring gently, like she too was dreaming of another time. I spent most of those days in the back garden, pruning the roses that had long since gone to thorn. My hands, still steady despite the years, knew the rhythm by heart. Cut at the bend, angle the shears, clear the dead so the new could breathe. There's a sermon in that, I suppose. It was in the garden, on the third day after Christmas, that I let myself speak the truth out loud. I miss her, I said softly, to the wind or the soil or maybe to God. I miss her like a limb I forgot I lost. The air didn't answer, but something inside me did. I realized then that grief doesn't always howl. Sometimes it hums low in the background, like a song you forgot you knew the words to. And I had been humming it for years. I hadn't just lost Lila at Christmas. I'd been losing her slowly, season by season, like water leaking from a hairline crack you don't notice until the floor buckles beneath your feet. It wasn't that she stopped loving me. I believe she still did, in some way. But she'd reshaped her love into something that no longer needed proximity. And I was still learning how to live with that. Because I had spent so long being her mother that I forgot how to be just Ellie, Eleanor Whitford. The woman who once dreamed of writing mystery novels. The girl who could whistle through her teeth. The widow who learned to change her own oil and cried in the pantry where no one could see. The woman who still deserved joy, even without a daughter to share it with. That night, I lit a single candle and pulled out a stack of old journals. Ones I'd written in the years after Richard died, mostly filled with recipes and grocery lists and dreams scribbled in the margins. But some entries were letters. Unsent. Forgotten. Honest. I flipped to one dated January 3rd, 5 years ago. Dear Lila, it began. I miss you in quiet ways. I miss the you that used to sit on the porch and braid your hair while I told you stories about the war. I miss how you used to call me mama like it was the most natural thing in the world. I miss how you needed me. And I know that makes me selfish. But I do. I touched the ink like it might still be wet. I hadn't changed much. Still waiting. Still wishing. But now I also knew something else. That I could miss her, and still live. A few days after the new year, the snow melted away in soft rivulets, like sorrow easing its grip. The sidewalks were wet but clear, and the camellias in my front yard had begun to bloom early, pink and brave against the winter gray. I took it as a sign. That morning, I made tea instead of coffee. Peppermint. Calming. I sat by the window where the light pooled like honey across the rug, and I thought about the kind of woman I wanted to be now. Not just a mother, but a whole person. I'd spent decades shaping my life around Lila's orbit. Her moods, her milestones, her silences. Like a moon pulling the tides. I'd called it love, and it was. But it was also fear. The fear that if I didn't anchor myself to her, I might float off into the unknown. Into myself. And now, that fear was gone. Or maybe just smaller than before. The music box sat quietly on the mantel, its little cabin still and dusted faintly with ash from the fireplace. I hadn't wound it in days. The album lay beside it, close but never far. I hadn't heard from Lila since Christmas. No follow-up message. No phone call. And that somehow no longer shattered me. Because here's the hard-earned truth, my dear. People love in the ways they know how. And sometimes that way doesn't match what we hoped for. Doesn't come with consistency or presence or even understanding. But it is love, in its imperfect, flickering form. And I had to stop punishing myself for not being able to pull it closer. That afternoon, I drove to the bookstore downtown. Not for anything in particular, just to be near the rustle of pages and the hum of people who hadn't forgotten how to linger. I bought a journal. Dark green linen bound. No lines. Just space. I didn't fill it with letters to Lila. I filled it with letters to myself. Small ones like, you matter even when you're not needed. Your life is not measured in who visits or who doesn't. It's okay to grieve someone who is still alive. And you are not less because she pulled away. You are more because you stayed soft. Each day, I wrote a little more. Sometimes I wrote about the way the soup tasted, or the shape of clouds that morning. Sometimes I wrote about Richard, and how he'd kiss my forehead like it was sacred. And sometimes I wrote about Lila, not to scold or mourn her, but to remember the parts of her I still carried. Because that's what a mother does. Even when the child forgets, the mother remembers. Even when the child leaves, the mother lights a lamp. Even when the child goes quiet, the mother listens anyway. By the end of that week, I found myself smiling more. Not because anything had changed, but because I had. I'd finally stopped waiting. Not out of bitterness, but out of love for the woman I still was, beneath all that waiting. It was a Tuesday when the phone finally rang. Late afternoon, sky dipped in that soft gold blush it wears when the sun is trying to apologize for leaving early. I was in the middle of pruning the indoor fern. A quiet ritual that made me feel, in some small way, that I was still growing something that needed me. When I saw her name light up the screen, Lila, my breath caught in my throat. My first instinct was to let it ring. Not out of anger. Not anymore. But because I wasn't sure I could hear her voice without feeling all the old ache come rushing back like a storm tide. But then I remembered, I wasn't who I was last Christmas. I answered. "Hey Mama," she said softly. It was her old voice. The one she used when she was tired or small, or trying to be brave. "Hi baby," I said, keeping my voice warm but steady. I leaned against the counter, hand braced on the wood like I might float off otherwise. A long pause. "Then did you get the album?" "I did." Another pause. "I didn't mean for it to be a replacement," she said quickly. I didn't know how to be there this year. Not the right way." I closed my eyes. "What way would that be, Lila?" She was quiet a moment. "I don't know. Like I used to be, maybe. But I'm not her anymore. And I think I was scared I'd disappoint you." Her voice cracked then, just the faintest break. But it hit me like thunder. "You could never disappoint me by showing up," I said. "Only by staying away." Another silence. This one longer. "I've been so far from you, Mama," she whispered. "I know," I said. My voice caught, but I didn't cry. "And I waited for you. Longer than I should have. But I stopped, Lila. Not because I don't love you, but because I do. And I needed to love me too." It was the hardest thing I'd ever said to her. The line was quiet for a long time. Just the sound of her breathing, then mine. Like we were on opposite sides of a canyon, trying to decide who should call out first. Finally, she said, "I don't know how to fix it." "You can't," I said gently. "It's not about fixing. It's about choosing." "Choosing what? To come back? Or not?" She was quiet. I could feel her thinking. Could almost see her, wherever she was, maybe in her kitchen, maybe on her apartment floor, legs tucked under her, head bowed. The same way she used to sit when she was learning to tie her shoes. Frustrated. Determined. Quietly brave. "I want to come back," she said finally. "But I need to do it as me. Not who I was. Not who you want me to be." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "I'd rather have the you that's real," I said, "than the memory I've been talking to all this time." She cried then. Not loud. Just the soft, startled kind. Like someone realizing they'd been holding their breath for years. I didn't try to stop her. I let the silence hold her like arms. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt held too. The call lasted nearly 2 hours. We didn't solve everything. You don't untangle years of distance in a single conversation. But we began. And beginnings, I've learned, are often quieter than we expect. Less like a trumpet, and more like a sunrise. Lila told me about her job. How it had swallowed her these past 2 years, leaving her too wrung out to reach for anything outside of it. How Travis had proposed last spring, then called it off by summer. How she hadn't told me because she didn't want to be seen as failing. I listened, and I didn't interrupt. I held my tongue the way you hold a teacup full to the brim. Careful not to spill, even when your hands tremble. "I didn't even love him, Mama," she said finally. Not really. I think I just wanted someone to need me. Oh, baby, I whispered. I've spent so long needing you, I didn't even notice you were starving too. She cried again then, softer this time. And I did too. She told me about therapy, about how it had opened doors inside her she didn't know were locked. About guilt. About shame. About the deep, clumsy fear of never being enough. For me, for herself. You were always enough, I said, without hesitation. But I wasn't what you expected, she replied. I thought about that for a long moment. No, I said finally. You weren't. You were more complicated. More honest. More stubborn. But also more beautiful. More brave. And maybe I didn't know how to love that version at first. But I do now. It felt like exhaling after years of holding air. At the end of the call, she said she might visit in February. Not a promise. But not a maybe either. I don't want to come out of obligation, she said. I want to come because I want to. That's the only reason I'll open the door, I said. We laughed then. Real tear-sore, tired laughter. The kind that comes after a long storm, when the roof's still dripping but the worst has passed. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, letting it all settle. Then I stood, walked over to the mantel, and picked up the photo I'd put away weeks earlier. I brushed the dust from the glass. It was us, at her high school graduation. Her cap slightly askew, my smile too wide. I didn't put it back in the center. I placed it to the side, next to the music box and the album. Because love, I realized, doesn't need to be front and center to still be real. Sometimes it just needs a place to rest. February came in soft and gray, like an old cardigan you slip on without thinking. The camellias were still blooming, stubborn little things, and the air held that faint whisper of spring, even though the night still bit your cheeks on the walk to the mailbox. She didn't call to say she was on her way. She just came. I was in the kitchen making corn muffins, the kind with jalapeno and sharp cheddar, just like she used to love, when I saw a figure through the window. I nearly dropped the bowl. She stood at the gate, suitcase in one hand, the other pushed deep in her coat pocket like she wasn't sure if she'd be welcomed. And for a split second, neither was I. Not because I didn't want her there, but because I didn't know who we'd be, now that we were no longer pretending. I opened the door. She looked different. Older, yes, but softer around the eyes. She wore no makeup, her hair pulled back in that loose, low bun she used to throw together when she was reading or cleaning or crying. Hey, Mama, she said. I stepped aside. No speeches. No tears. Just space. She crossed the threshold like someone stepping into an old church, reverent, a little scared, but longing to remember. Muffin meowed once and twirled at her feet. God, I miss this house, she whispered, fingers brushing the old side table, as if confirming it was real. We didn't rush into conversation. We didn't unpack drama like dishes. Instead, we made tea, sat at the table, watched the wind through the bare pecan tree. The silences between us didn't ache like they used to. They rested, like old dogs napping in the corners of the room. She stayed 4 days. We didn't talk about Christmas. We didn't rehash the missed calls, the broken promises. Instead, we folded laundry together. We watched old episodes of Murder, She Wrote. She helped me clip dead leaves from the houseplants and asked if I still made that pear chutney she used to hate, but now craved. I don't have the recipe anymore, I teased. She grinned. It's in your green notebook. Back shelf. I blinked. She'd remembered something I'd forgotten. On the second night, we sat on the porch swing, wrapped in shawls and a shared quilt. I used to dream of this porch when I was in Boston, she said. The sound of the wind in those chimes. The way the air smells like wood smoke and earth. Then why didn't you come home? I asked gently. She didn't flinch. I was afraid I'd disappoint you again. That I'd come back and feel even more alone than I did up there. I reached for her hand, held it the way I used to when she was small and feverish, her palm too hot, her body curled into mine like a secret. You will disappoint me, I said. And I will disappoint you. That's how it works. She looked at me, eyes shining. But you'll still love me. Always, I said. Even when I don't understand you. Even when I have to let go. She laid her head on my shoulder. I think I'm ready to come back, she whispered. Not to who I was. Just to you. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The wind moved through the chimes, the porch creaked, and somewhere in the distance, a nightbird sang the beginning of a song we hadn't heard in a long, long time. We didn't mark the moment she became mine again. There was no ceremony, no declaration, just a dozen tiny moments stitched together like the hem of a well-loved quilt. Like the way she refilled my bird feeder without being asked. Or how she slipped a handwritten grocery list into my purse before leaving, with silly things on it like more of that smelly soap you like, and snack cookies for emergencies. Or how she started calling me mama again without hesitation. Like the word had never been a stranger. The night before she left, we made dinner together. Chicken and dumplings, collard greens, cornbread from scratch. The kitchen filled with steam and the scent of garlic and rosemary. And we danced around each other like we'd never stopped. She wore my apron, the faded yellow one with embroidered violets, and sang along to the jazz station playing soft in the background. Remember how I used to hate this music? She asked, laughing. No, I said with a smile. I remember how you pretended to hate it so I'd change it to pop radio. She rolled her eyes. You caught that? Of course I did. I'm your mother. We ate by candlelight, not for romance or ritual, but because it made the ordinary feel holy. She asked about Richard, about things she never used to. How we met, how he proposed, what kind of coffee he drank. Black, I said, like judgment. Said sugar was for the weak. She laughed so hard she snorted. Later, we sat on the couch wrapped in blankets, watching White Christmas for the 100th time. She reached for my hand halfway through. Didn't let go until the credits rolled. When it was time for her to leave the next morning, we didn't cry. We stood by the car, her suitcase already in the trunk, and let the February sun warm our faces for a moment. She turned to me and said, I'm not going to disappear again. I nodded. I believe you. She hugged me tight, whispered, Thank you for waiting. I pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. I didn't wait, Lila. I lived. And I'm still living. She smiled at that. A real one. The kind that starts in the eyes and works its way down to the soul. As she drove off, I didn't feel hollow. I didn't feel abandoned. I felt full, not because everything was fixed, but because I'd stopped trying to make it perfect. I'd opened the door, and she'd stepped through, not as the daughter I once had, but as the woman she was still becoming. And well, I was becoming someone too. Not just Mama. Not just the one who waited. But Eleanor Whitford. A woman with her own story. A story still unfolding. The camellias are nearly gone now. Their petals littering the walkway like pink confetti after some quiet celebration. The air's turned warm again, humid in that southern way that makes your skin remember it's alive. I sit on the porch most evenings now, a glass of sweet tea in one hand, a book in the other, muffin curled beside me like a purring secret. The wind moves through the chimes slow and patient. They don't sing, not loudly, but they whisper, and I've learned to listen. The music box still sits on the mantel. I wind it now and then, not out of nostalgia, but because the songs change somehow. I hear it differently. And that little photo album? It stays on the coffee table beside the candles and coasters. I open it sometimes when the world gets too loud. Let the pages remind me that being seen, really seen, is a gift even when it comes late. Lila calls every Sunday now. Not always long conversations. Sometimes we just sit with each other's breathing, like when she was a baby and would fall asleep on my chest, soothed just by the rhythm of my heart. She's planning another visit come spring. This time, I didn't offer to buy the ticket. And she didn't ask. Somewhere between Christmas and now, we both learned something sacred. You don't show love through grand gestures alone. You show it by showing up. By staying. By being willing to begin again. If this story opened something quiet in your heart, my dear, I'd love to know what lingered. Leave me a note below. Share it with someone who might be walking that same road. And subscribe if you'd like to sit for another story sometime soon. Some tales find us when we need them most. And some hearts come home, in their own time. Ellie Yellowheart.